The Supreme Court issued major decisions today, including a 6-3 ruling, which the High Court upheld state laws banning transgender students from competing on girls' sports teams. President Trump is applauding the decision, calling it a big win. Joining us now, two people who backed the bans on transgender athletes in women's sports. Madison Kenyon is a former collegiate athlete. Kristen Wagner is the president and CEO of Alliance Defending Freedom, who served as co-counsel defending West Virginia's ban before the Supreme Court. Thank you both for coming in this afternoon. So, Madison, just first of all, what's your reaction to this ruling?
I'm ecstatic. I'm so excited that this has come out. My heart is full of gratitude for the attorney generals and for ADF and all their work on this, and to know that no female in the 27 states that have the protection will have to compete against a male like I did and be pushed back, watch their teammates pushed off podiums. That won't happen.
When it comes to the decision here, the 3 liberal justices did concur in part. They also dissented in part, arguing that the majority had wrongly decided that trans student athletes cannot bring constitutional challenges against the state bans. How do you take that? How do you respond to that?
Well, I think it's important to recognize what the court did rule, which is the majority. And the majority of the court ruled that under Title IX, you don't have to overhaul girls' sports in order to allow men to compete against women. Also, the majority held in the 6-3 that, again, biology is real, that it matters in sports, and that states have the right to be able to protect women and girls.
But what do you make of, too, specifically, that they said that they had wrongly decided that trans student athletes cannot bring constitutional challenges against the state bans?
There were two essentially arguments. One was under a federal statute, Title IX. The second was the Equal Protection Clause. And let's be clear about what the 3 justices did say. They couldn't even say that a boy who identifies as a girl has the constitutional right to do so. They simply said that they thought the lower courts should have to study that issue more carefully in the facts. But we also know that there's a consensus in the science right now that there are inherent physical advantages that the male body has over the female. And we also know that 8 in 10 Americans agree with that. It's common sense.
When we look at where things stand, the International Olympic Committee had announced in March that trans women, Madison, couldn't compete in female sports categories at the Olympics. The NCAA has imposed some new restrictions. In the wake of this ruling, do you, anticipate seeing more restrictions? And is that something that you'd like to see? And is there anywhere specifically you're looking at?
I think what we're going to start seeing is more and more states protecting their women and preventing men from competing in women's sports. I got a scholarship to Idaho State. I wouldn't have gone there without my scholarship. I wouldn't have competed in athletics without that scholarship, and that scholarship got me a degree. It has paved my entire future. Protecting those opportunities for women is so important because before Title IX, we didn't really have them. So if you put men in women's sports, you sideline us and prevent us from having those opportunities, and we have nowhere left to go.
A number of, you noted 27 states, so more than half the states in the country, obviously, do have bans on youth participating do have sports bans, as we were noting. That this ruling is that they may be banned, right, under Title IX, not that they must be banned. Is that something that you anticipate changing or that you would push for?
Well, I would first say that what the ruling does is ensure that women and girls have the right to equal opportunities in sport. That's what it does. All people have the right to compete, and we want all people to flourish in that. But the safest, the clearest, the most objective and workable way is to make sex-based categories because of these inherent physical advantages. I do expect this decision eventually to impact the 23 states because the court recognized that there are physical advantages that can exist, and we're already litigating in those states because it's time for those governors, it's time for those legislators to do the right thing and protect all.
Becky Pepper Jackson, who of course is the plaintiff in the West Virginia case, she previously had this to say. I just want to play a little bit of her sound.
In 2021, politicians in my state passed a law banning me, the only transgender student athlete in the entire state, from playing on the team that reflects who I really am. I know this case isn't just about me, or even just about sports. It's just one part of a plan to push transgender people like me out of the public life entirely.
Do you believe there should be other limits? She says this is step one, in her view, on pushing trans people out of public life. Should there be bans in other areas or something that you're pushing for that would limit the rights of trans people in other areas of public life?
Because of the differences in the male body to the female body, it's appropriate that when sex matters, we recognize it in the law. And let's talk about Becky Pepper Jackson in this moment.
Let me just stop you there for a second. Where do you believe sex matters specifically?
I think it matters on the athletic field, and we can see the evidence of that. Becky Pepper Jackson displaced and defeated 470 girls 1,400 times during his middle school career. Took 2 regional championships and 1 state championship. Sexually harassed and threatened with vile language to violate another woman in the locker room. That's what we're talking about here. Our girls deserve equal opportunities on the field and privacy in their locker rooms.
And to follow up on the question, do you believe she is concerned that there will be other efforts, right, in public life? So you said where sex matters. You're talking specifically, I know, about sports and on the field. Are there other areas that you believe sex matters that you would be pushing for?
I think that sex matters in private spaces. I think that in our dorm rooms and in our locker rooms, we shouldn't be forced or shamed because we don't want to undress in front of a male. When a male, like Becky Pepper Jackson, which this actually happened, threatens to put male genitalia into one of the female teammates, you know that body parts matter, and that's what this case was about. So yes, I do think that in private spaces it matters greatly. But this decision was very clearly focused on sports, and the court said so in the decision itself.
Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. It is an issue of fairness. So the way that people talk down to vulnerable communities is an issue that I have a hard time with as well. So both things I can hold in my hand.
How do you think Democrats are going to grapple with this?
Let's say, first of all, more voters have an opinion on this issue than have ever been affected by this issue, which you noted from the statistics. But I will say, Democrats are in complete retreat on this issue. You have seen everyone from progressives like Adam Schiff to moderates like Alyssa Slotkin to Governor Newsom basically say some version of it's a version of fairness, or we need to leave it to localities, or we need to leave it to states. There are very few Democrats that are willing to say what they were willing to say 6 years ago, which was to advocate for trans women to play in women's sports.
How does it interact with the law?
So the key word, and Christine Brennan said this, is may, not must at this point, which is the states may now choose to outlaw this. The question is, will that become a must? And there will be a legal effort. There are some already underway to turn it into a must, because the ruling today was an interesting ruling. It was 9-0 with all the liberals joining that it is okay under Title IX to do this, to ban transgender athletes from women's sports. So if it's okay to ban them under Title IX, does it then follow that they must be banned under Title IX? So I promise you this issue, it'll take months or years to make its way up, but the next step is going to be to argue that you cannot allow transgender athletes to play in women's sports.
And where does a case like that come from? Does it come from someone in a state that doesn't ban them?
Yeah, it'll come from, it could arise up through any number of states, through the district court. You could have multiple different rulings, sometimes contradictory rulings in different districts and then different circuits. That's what the Supreme Court's ultimately there for, to give us one unified final decision for the whole country.
Yeah, Sochi?
I think Democrats right now will largely are not talking about it. What Democrats see in their polling, especially in tough districts, is that if you're talking to a voter, the top 5 issues, boys and girls sports is not one of them. It's the economy. It is things like healthcare. It's costs of living. It's all of these issues. And so what Democrats see this as, yes, Republicans will try to run on it. They will run ads. We're seeing it in my home state of Texas, where my sister is running for governor. Like they are trying to bring this up as an issue because they don't want to talk about the economy. They don't want to talk about issues that they're polling so poorly on right now. And so Democrats see this as much of a distraction. As a mom, what concerns me is that bullying in schools is already a thing. Why are we targeting kids? And I think that is just from a human perspective, this is going to increase bullying of children. And they're right. You know, I think what she was just saying is right. We're talking about high school kids. We're talking about kids in their most critical years as they are growing. If you want to have a conversation about sports, fine. But let's leave our children out of it.
Look, this is a 90-10 issue, and I don't think you can divorce the political realities of the economy from the crossover of culture. And I think Republicans have recognized that to great effect when you look at polling surveys, focus groups, et cetera. Now, I agree with Christine in terms of the sensitivities and how you discussed this. I can't imagine what parents of trans kids have to navigate with helping them explore and figure out the world. I just can't imagine that, and I want to acknowledge that. But there is a fundamental question of fairness that the governor of California even acknowledged. And I think at some point we have to figure this out in a way that doesn't disenfranchise the rights of trans kids. I certainly wouldn't want to be discriminatory in nature against anyone, but while maintaining the fairness of girls on girls teams and vice versa.
But this also doesn't impact very many. I mean, if there are state laws. This isn't, you just heard, it doesn't impact very many people. There are about 15 kids that they knew that they were trans where it actually impacted. We're talking about an issue that is more of a culture war. It's a scare tactic in many communities. And when you actually go into these states, it's not widely a thing to where there are boys participating in girls' sports. They have opinions, but it's not a thing.
But to Sochi's point, Republicans came out of the 2024 election believing that they can just run on this issue and they will automatically win. Now, what happened last year in gubernatorial races, both in Virginia and in New Jersey, Republicans ran on this issue hugely. They spent tens of millions of dollars mostly on this issue, and they lost in a huge way. They basically lost both races by double digits.
Yeah, but again, it goes back to my point, Alex. You can't divorce the tangible realities of what people are facing from the cultural ones. I think you can focus on two things at once and make that argument and appeal to the American people. Again, looking at the polling data on where they stand on that issue.